Diolch, Aidan. Pnawn da pawb, good afternoon. Yes, so Tim Opie, I'm Policy Officer with the Welsh Local Government Association. I became aware of the research that Ronald Dahl and his associates carried out about 5 years ago. And there were two papers initially: why interventions to influence adolescents' behaviour often fail but could succeed, and in the importance of investing in adolescents from a development science perspective. And what struck me in some of the findings, which identified that status, respect, and empowerment when working with young people are crucial in motivating them, was how that underpinned some of the major developments that we were working on in Wales. You'll be familiar with the whole school approach, the whole system approach with the nest, nurturing, empowering, safe and trusting principle, the no wrong door, but also the new curriculum. Youth work principles run through the findings as well. For colleagues who aren't aware, the youth work principles and purposes document, there are 5 pillars: empowering, educative, expressive, participative, and inclusive. So as you can see, they resonate with that also. Before I hand over to Professor Ronald Dahl, I was reading a blog last week, and I'll put the link to the blog in the chat in due course, by a clinical psychologist called Naomi Fisher. The blog was entitled "The Side Effects of School, a Crisis in Mental Health That Can't Be Solved Through Therapy." And she pointed to some research by Edward Dechy and Richard Ryan, which shows that in order for a person to be intrinsically motivated, they need autonomy, a sense of mastery, and good quality relationships. I hope I haven't stolen too much of Professor Dahl's thunder. Obviously, you've come here to listen to him, not to me. So I will segue into Professor Dahl, and thank you for attending.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here this afternoon, your time, from morning in California. And it was a great introduction because the issues around autonomy and wanting to matter are at the heart of what we're going to be talking about today. And I also want to emphasize that when I talk about the research, these are interdisciplinary teams. It's really about a large group of individuals across many disciplines. I'm going to share my screen and we can begin. And the first thing I want to say is that although in many ways what I'm going to be focusing on is adolescent brain development, it's really about how the brain learns. And when I talk about learning, it's not just taking in information and remembering it the way we think about learning in a narrow way, but it's really about learning about who we are in relation to other people, our values, our motivations that we feel in a heartfelt way, and understanding how brain development creates opportunities for those kinds of learning experiences is really at the heart of how to use this information in ways that hopefully will resonate with educational principles and priorities and preparing young people for successful lives, working lives, contribution lives. The next thing I want to say is that the science that we find most relevant isn't simply about brain development. It's really what we call the developmental science of adolescence. And when I say developmental science, it's really very much an interdisciplinary approach. It is a field that has emerged over the last 10 or 15 years, beginning with a lot of focus on early brain development, but it brings together not only developmental neuroscience, the study of brain development, but also developmental psychology, education sciences, the science of learning and different aspects of learning. And it's very relevant to public health and the social, clinical, and implementation of the basic science in real world settings. We need teams that work across those levels. And it's very important in relation to understanding the role, not just of taking in the right information and pedagogy, but the social, economic, and cultural contexts that shape our values. And I'm going to unpack that in a more careful way and scientifically as we proceed. The first thing is, let's define what we mean by adolescence. It's a term that gets used in a lot of different ways. And I think people who debate and try to come up with a rigorous definition of adolescence often do that by beginning with the transition from childhood into adolescence, which is associated with the beginnings of changes around puberty, the rapid growth and changes that are beginning. And as most of you probably know, the age at which those changes are occurring has been happening earlier. And so often by 10 or 11 or 12, some of those preliminary changes of rapid growth and change are beginning. And then adolescence doesn't end at a particular age. The end of adolescence isn't when you simply stop growing or the brain changes in some ways. It's really when you fully take on adult roles and responsibilities. And so we often find it helpful to think about adolescence as a set of changes that begin around age 10 or 11 in early adolescence, continue through middle adolescence, but then late adolescence and transition into adulthood continues to be a really important time for learning. And the particular opportunities change across those windows of time. But the bigger point I want to make is that adolescence itself has expanded. For most of human history, is a relatively short time between beginning to have mature adult growth and taking on adult roles. And increasingly that is expanding with puberty starting earlier and the complexity of taking on fuller roles happening later. Now, when we have been studying this over the last 15 or 20 years, one of the things that we focus on as an initial window of opportunity and vulnerability is as this transition begins, as childhood is ending with these physical changes. And it's important to think, and I'm sure many of you are aware of this when we reflect, how many different kinds of changes and interacting levels of change. So there's rapid physical growth. Children are growing steadily, but when puberty kicks in, there's this spurt of growth. It's more rapid. There's the activation of new drives and motivations associated with puberty. There are sex-specific changes in the facial structure and body characteristics. Your body begins changing in multiple ways and that are different. And there's changes in sleep and the circadian timing of our sleep. There are metabolic changes associated with growing and changing so rapidly. There are changes in cognitive processes, but in particular, there are changes in social information processing. And we're going to unpack that. We become more sensitive to social feedback. We all want to be admired. We all want to be respected. We don't want to be put down or diminished, but the intensity of those feelings change as we move into adolescence. And that's at the heart of how I think the science is really relevant. It is a period of dynamic learning and development, particularly around social relationships and self-other learning. Now, this became of great interest to a lot of researchers because of the health implications. And this is what we often refer to as the health paradox of adolescence. Because on one hand, adolescence is physically the healthiest period of the lifespan. If you measure almost anything, any capacity from elementary school, early elementary school into late adolescence, it gets better. Strength, speed, reaction time, reasoning abilities, immune function, resistance to cold, stress challenges. And yet, if you look at overall death and disability, morbidity and mortality rates in terms of public health, those increase 200 to 300% between childhood and the end of adolescence. And these aren't mysterious medical illnesses. These are problems with the control of behavior and emotion. It's increasing rates of accident, suicide, homicide, depression, mental health problems, alcohol and substance use, violence, reckless behaviors, and on and on. And these were the reasons that people began studying adolescent brain development to understand these vulnerabilities. Why are there so many problems emerging in adolescence, and how might the brain development inform that? And in addition to measurable health problems, it's also a key time for the development of habits, preferences, patterns of behavior that are emerging that have long-term health consequences, whether that's smoking, whether that's exercise activities, but it's also very relevant to educational and learning habits, preferences, and values. Now, the most important point I want to make in framing this is that for everything we can say about the negative vulnerability side of the equation has turned out to be equally true on the positive side. These rapid multi-level changes that are happening during early adolescence not only create a perfect storm of vulnerabilities for things spiraling down in young people's lives, it creates opportunities for spiraling up. It's a time of learning, exploration, acquiring deeper new knowledge and skills, forming habits on the positive side. And at the heart of this is it's a key time in identity formation, understanding who we are in relation to other people. And intrinsic motivations are at the heart of this. It is the classic work of Ryan and DC that was cited earlier, that we have a desire to be autonomous, and this desire to have this independence in some ways, but contributions in other ways, that is shaped deeply by this increased desire to contribute and have value, allows us to feel motivations, not by making ourselves do something we don't want to do, but we develop almost an appetite, almost a wanting to do these things. It's like, it's not just that you're a football player. It's not just that you like to play football, it's that our identity is as a football player. It's a heartfelt goal. You're an honest person, not by just valuing that, it's fundamentally your identity. Shaping these heartfelt goals is one of the most important sets of opportunities. And this work has really required transdisciplinary people working across different sectors and scientific disciplines to understand the implications of these insights. And I want to unpack some parts of that a bit. Now, this broader set of issues is that it's not only shaping heartfelt goals and the way the brain is wiring up, as we'll talk about in a few minutes. It's really such an important time for setting habits, preferences, and values. Now, some of that starts very early. We all know that. Some of these individual differences are developed at very early ages. But there's another set of values and mindsets that are really shaped more actively in early adolescence and into adolescence. And that's been an important set of insights scientifically. There's been this idea that between the 0 and 3, the first few years of life, that so much of the brain is taking shape. And that is true. But what's equally true is there's a lot of plasticity and rewiring of the brain well into early adolescence and well through adolescence that is at least as important for many aspects of what we care about. And that's really at the basis of the work I'm going to talk about. Now, this idea that if we understand how learning happens in the brain and the particular ways that learning is more sensitive to influences in adolescence, that creates insights into windows of opportunity, not just for the negative spirals and health problems that we talked about earlier, but for positive opportunities to help elevate young people, to help them be having uplifting experiences that not only have positive effects on their health, education, and social and economic success, but also to societies by increasing their capacity to contribute in valuable ways. So let me slow down a little bit now and dig into the science a bit. And the first point that I want to make, and this work has been really strengthened by a lot of basic science research in early child development. So we're going to focus on that briefly. The core principle here is that learning and brain development are inextricably intertwined. They are interacting constantly from birth well through adolescence and early adulthood. What do I mean by that? I mean that patterns of experience are altered as the brain develops, and as we learn and take in new information, the brain development is influenced. I'm going to give you a couple examples of this. We know this deeply from work in the first few years of life. A key aspect of how young children master new capacities, learning to walk, talk, recognize faces, is that they're attracted to practice those behaviors over and over and over again. A toddler learning to walk takes thousands of steps, covers about 46 football fields a day, and multiple up to 100 times falling down and getting back up. That's a lot of practice. That's a lot of grit and resilience to keep getting back up, not because they have executive function or push themselves. They have a natural inclination. Wiring up the control of eye movements and vision. By 2 months of age, Mark Johnson's work has shown infants have moved. They've executed their eye movements 2.5 million times. That's a tremendous amount of practice. The wiring in the brain is being shaped. What are they looking at? They're looking at faces. They're naturally drawn to look at faces and study faces and recognize emotion in faces. The brain is prepared to learn how to walk and talk and recognize emotion in faces, and it practices it over and over again. And that practice is shaping the neural connections. They're learning a particular language. They're learning particular people's faces. They're learning to pay attention to particular emotions. That learning is formative and foundational, but it's not only happening in the first few years of life. Those experiences of brain development and learning going hand in glove are happening well through adolescence. And in contrast to some of the ideas that adolescent brains are broken or not up to speed as an adult brain, adolescent brains are phenomenally well suited to what adolescents should be doing, to learn and develop in new ways. And they actually learn more rapidly than adults learn in many situations. The science of learning is showing us increasingly in rapidly changing environments, volatile changing environments, adolescents learn faster than adults. And they are quick to flip modes between exploring new ways of doing things and persisting when they work in ways that adults aren't as good at. So the adolescent brain is remarkable. It's really well adapted to the tasks and challenges of adolescence. And what makes it awkward and seem less efficient in some cognitive ways is because there's extra attention and response to emotional and social information. As puberty kicks in, there is an increase in sensation seeking, liking new, uncertain experiences a bit more, and being more socially motivated and more responsive and reactive to social evaluation. Now that creates a lot of noise, creates a lot of emotional noise. And anyone who's spent a lot of time with young people in 11, 12, 13 knows how emotionally noisy those social environments are. But that is a learning environment. They're figuring out who they are and how to navigate social situations. And that learning is not only allowing them to develop social and emotional skills, which we know are fundamental and formative, but it's also allowing them to develop individually their own social and emotional tendencies and values. Now, the analogy here is that there are processes that are a bit akin to a toddler learning to walk, or an infant learning a language, or an infant learning to read emotions in other faces. The brain naturally is attracted to and wants to learn those things. And if you just give them positive opportunities, they will learn those things. They don't need to be drilled or forced to practice. They will actually want to naturally engage and are motivated to learn those things. So the question for many of the researchers is, well, as puberty is kicking in and as these changes are occurring, what does the adolescent brain want to learn? What does it want to be practicing? And actually, we have learned a lot about it, and it would fit with what I think a lot of good observers and good parents and teachers and coaches and grandparents have observed for a long period of time. What they want to be learning about is relationships and others. It's about learning who they are in relation to other people. This motivation to engage in new ways with social relationships, who they're attracted to, how they feel charged emotions about friends and who betrays whom and who you trust. The intensity of those feelings, whether you're admired and respected, whether you're mastering things that are valuable, the emotions around those experiences, those are important across the entire lifespan. We all want to be admired and respected. We all want autonomy, but the intensity of those feelings, the negative experience of being humiliated or disrespected is more intense, and the thrill of being admired and taken seriously is also more intense. And the learning that's happening is so shaped by the community and culture. There's an increased appetite of wanting to belong and feel valued that naturally inclines young people to want to contribute and to matter in a larger way. It's part of searching in some ways for meaning and purpose in some larger way that is emerging for the first time in new ways in adolescence. So this brings us to briefly summarize a lot of research that has tried to unpack the details and specifics about what's happening in the brain as puberty is beginning. And most of those changes aren't in how we think or our cognitive processes or just how we take in information in abstract ways. It's about how we process social and emotional information and how those shape our natural motivations, our intrinsic motivations, what we naturally want to do, what we feel drawn to want to do and contribute. And this increase in liking some kinds of intense experiences, and this increased sensitivity to social value feedback. Do I matter? Am I important? Do I have some, not only a sense of belonging, but contribution in the context, the social context in which I want to belong? Those dynamics are driving learning. There's an increased desire to be respected, to earn prestige, not just to be dominant, not just to win competitions, not just to be popular. Those things we know those things become more important. But there's also these opportunities to earn prestige, to be admired for being kind, for being generous, for being honest, for being helpful to other people, for being funny. There are many ways to find a social niche where you're contributing in ways that make you feel a sense of belonging and value. And the hunger for that is powerful in adolescence and can be a positive motivation to find ways to contribute in larger ways and to shape your individual heartfelt goals, what you naturally want to do because you feel that's intrinsically who you are. Now, this idea has been examined in a variety of ways. One of my favorite quotes that captures this is a famous quote from Maya Angelou. She said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And we all know that. We all know that experience. That set of experiences where you're trying to give information to someone, but you make them feel diminished or disrespected or put down or humiliated, the intensity of those feelings is amplified in adolescence. But the reverse is true. The capacity to inspire young people by creating opportunities for them to master difficult things, to support them through that, and to find ways to contribute is more thrilling, just as being put down is more painful and humiliating. And those dynamics that become amplified are at the heart of creating positive on-ramps for young people in a variety of ways, not just to be successful in school or in sports. Those are wonderful ways to have these experiences, but to find a wide range of ways to contribute, feel connected, and matter. So we've been using this term in our center in the developing adolescent more frequently, is that a key way to understand what is particularly important in adolescence is that mattering really matters. It's a time when mattering to other people becomes amplified as a motivation. And that allows lots of ways, lots of pro-social, adaptive, healthy ways for young people to find ways to matter. If they don't have opportunities to feel like they matter in healthy ways, they're more likely to find ways to feel like they matter in negative ways. And so from a social perspective, creating more opportunities, not just to be liked and admired and respected, but ways to contribute and feel like you've earned respect and earned prestige and earned status. Now, obviously, there are sort of cheap ways to do that, to just gain popularity or attention really quickly and as a flash. Those are not as likely to be healthy. But creating ways for young people to earn that kind of prestige and admiration by contributing, by finding ways to do things well, that's the sweet spot that helps promote pro-social adaptive development. So this desire to wanting to feel like one matters, this motivation to learn ways to contribute, some of that is clearly true even in early childhood experiences, and it's continuing through adulthood. But this amplification creates opportunities for young people to get the feelings they want to have, that feeling of mattering, by contributing, by finding a niche. And that can be working in a variety of ways for others. It can be finding ways to contribute that are recognized through a wide variety of sports, activities, clubs, contributing to society, to your community, to your family, to friends. Finding ways to create those feelings authentically. Just telling people they matter in words may not create those feelings. It's having the experiences that you've earned it that go hand in glove with what young people are wanting to feel, just like toddlers want to get up and try walking again and again. The social and emotional relationship learning in early adolescence is being pulled, it's being attracted to finding ways to contribute, which is a good thing. It's part of the amazing capacities in adolescent brain development for people to have ways to seek contribution opportunities. Now, what is that doing in the brain? I want to just take a few minutes to go over just one line of research that helps us get insights into why those particular experiences become so important. And the first thing to say here is that in the field of neuroscience, what we're understanding increasingly is it's not about the shape and structure of different areas of our brain. And people talk about the frontal cortex or the amygdala as structures. Increasingly, what we're understanding is what makes us uniquely different isn't the size of our amygdala or the size of our prefrontal cortex. It is the patterns of connection across these different neural systems. There are these superhighways and faster highways and back roads. The patterns of connection across the brain and how different parts of the brain work together is really at the heart of understanding individual differences that are shaped by development. And the connectome is basically, in a quantified way, looking at, for a particular person, where exactly are your superhighways and where are your relatively fast roads between different areas of the brain, and where are there fewer connections. And those are shaped by in individual ways. If you look at adult connectomes, they're quite different and quite distinct. But when do those distinctions occur? Well, it's like a fingerprint in a way. It's like a connectome level of individual differences like a fingerprint. But fingerprints are different from birth. Connectomes are not. One of the most amazing things that's emerged is that even children 8 to 10 years of age, the connectomes that across different children are much more similar. This graph shows basically the percentage of distinctiveness. How different is the connectome if we looked at those maps of all the connections in the brain across these systems? This shows that 15% distinction means that they're 85% the same, or 25% distinction means they're 75% the same. These are children 8 to 12 years of age in the bottom. And the black line is all of the kids, and the blue is the males, and the orange is the females. What you can see is that between ages 10 and 16, they go from being 25% distinct to being more than 55% distinct. Who we are at the level of where those superhighways and those fast-acting ways of responding and feeling in different situations is being shaped to a very large degree between ages 10 and 16. And what's interesting is in girls and females, it's happening earlier and it's accelerating more rapidly. And in boys, it starts a little later. Puberty starts on average about 1.5 years earlier in girls and boys. This really seems to be tied to puberty kicking in these more intense feelings and motivational links across the brain, and then this particular sets of experiences. It's not one experience. It's like a toddler learning to walk. It's those social experiences of figuring out who you are, how you can matter, how you can contribute, is shaping the structure of your brain that's going to be having those same superhighways for probably the rest of our lives. They can continue to change, just like we can continue to learn new languages as adults, but it takes a lot more effort and experience more and more times to really shape those connections. The plasticity in the brain is really being shaped in large ways, not only by the first few years of life, but at the connectome level between ages 10 and 16. Why is that important? Because that creates opportunities, not just for the negative patterns, but for the positive patterns. Between ages 10 and 14 is one set of transitions as puberty is kicking in, when a lot of young people feel like they don't belong in school. That's not their world. That doesn't make them feel a sense of belonging. And they begin to disengage. And by 8th grade, as they are moving in the US system, by the time they're 14, they may really just fall off the academic cliff. That's not their world. having other ways for them to connect and contribute and master challenging things becomes even more important in that window of time. And at the same time, there's this increase in sensation seeking. They like new and exciting things, which can make them more likely to take risks. But those risks can also be positive. If they could take risks to try new things and they master them, those can be positive pathways. It's a key time in social identity formation. When we're learning about ourselves in relation to others and creating these feelings of belonging and connection and feeling valued and respected, having positive experiences in those ways, and the particular channels, whether that's through sports or writing or literature or civic engagement or helping or working in a job that makes you feel valued, earning prestige in these positive ways by contributing and mastering difficult challenges is really shaping individual development in powerful ways. And it's shaping not only how we think and habits and mindsets, but what we feel at a heartfelt level is who we are and what we want to be. And these functional brain connections between our emotional values and priorities and our goals are being actively shaped during that period of time. So in summary, adolescence appears to be a developmental window of opportunity, and it's a key time for motivational learning. And when I say motivation, it's not motivation at the level of making ourselves do things. That's part of motivation. But what do we naturally want to do? It's like falling in love with literature or a sport. We naturally get pulled to wanting to do more of that. And the brain expects to adjust the targets and intensities of these motivational feelings through practice. And those practice experiences that really move us, that really uplift us in these ways of feeling like that we're valued, that we belong, and that we're contributing, are formative and powerful. There are natural proclivities in adolescence to learn about social relationships, who we are in relation to other people, in the same way there's natural proclivities for a toddler learning to walk. They're going to experiment. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to feel embarrassed and humiliated. They're going to mess up. But that's just like a toddler falling down and getting back up. Finding support and positive outlets for these learning experiences are incredibly important in this window of time for positive outcomes, not just to prevent the negative ones. And in essence, finding ways to feel like you matter by doing things that matter to others. That's pro-social development. It is win-win. It's good for our communities and families and nations to matter by doing things that matter to others. And it is good for individuals. And we're all going to be different in where our capacities are and where we can best contribute. And it's a natural set of proclivities for young people to search for meaning, to search for ways that they can matter in larger ways. It's also a risk for people to get that feeling in unhealthy ways. Early adolescence is a sensitive period for learning these pro-social motivations and these learning mindsets and work mindsets that are really an investment for tendencies that will be enduring for a long period of time. They continue to be shaped in mid-adolescence, in late adolescence, and early adulthood, social transitions, changes in life. There's a lot of plasticity in the brain that continues. But just like with the early child development, creating positive tendencies during earlier windows really have larger impact. And other transitions, like transition into adulthood, also creates unique opportunities. That would be a separate talk. But increasingly, I think the science is telling us that it's not just about a single channel of success or having people, do things in a particular way. It's helping to encourage people to find their own path to matter, to contribute, and feel like they're earning prestige in these positive pro-social ways during these windows of time. School can be an incredibly powerful platform, structure, environment to promote those kinds of experiences. And after-school experiences and work experiences and civic engagement, finding broader ways to contribute are equally as important for having those positive learning experiences. So thank you very much. I went over a lot of information very quickly. I'm hoping that the general principles that I've outlined and giving some insights into the brain development research that help to illustrate how these interactions between our thoughts, our feelings, and our sense of self and wanting to have positive experiences in those ways help that they resonate in some of your experiences and ideas. So I look forward to having a chance to address questions to begin to make the links between some of these ideas. So it looks like there are some that are appearing in the chat. Just a second. So the issue of young people who have experienced trauma is a huge issue. A lot of my colleagues, a number of colleagues around the world have been focusing on this for a variety of reasons. It's been a huge interest in the United States, looking at different kinds of trauma. And that includes, there's a lot of interest in our country of how inequality and poverty and racism contributes to some kinds of trauma. Obviously, we have war situations around the world that create trauma for young people. There's sources of violence and substance abuse. I think that there are I'm going to slow down because these are complex issues. So one of the areas of research that has had a lot of attention recently, particularly in the last couple of years, focuses on early trauma, that is in the first 5 to 8 years of life. And there's an increasing concern that minimizing those traumatic experiences is hugely important because the brain is sensitive in different ways, particularly early on to certain kinds of trauma. And there is also research that even among young people who have experienced trauma in early development, early adolescence is another window of opportunity. Kate McLaughlin, who's a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Harvard, has been doing she and her team have done some really innovative research showing that as these new motivations kick in at puberty and what young people find salient, they're trying to look for what feels meaningful, that can create new opportunities even for young people who have experienced trauma. The second part of this is that having trauma-focused interventions and sensitivity to the fact that young people have experienced trauma, there's a lot of really innovative programs that are incorporating those insights into how to promote young people in that period of time. And then the third thing is that obviously a lot of young people continue to have traumatic experiences or new traumatic experiences in early adolescence. And those are also really important issues to focus on. I think that the most important principle I want to highlight from a lot of research in this area, including some of my original team's research looking at anxiety and depression in children and adolescents, is that focusing on the negative experiences is important to understand individual differences. But even with a high rate of negative experiences and traumatic experiences, the presence of positive is crucial. Creating new positive experiences, new opportunities, having new social learning in this window when young people are more naturally inclined to learn about self and other and relationships, creates new opportunities to have positive experiences, to learn how to trust. One really strong, trusting, mentoring relationship in early to mid-adolescence can be powerful. I saw a study recently from children in foster care system in the United States that have had numerous relocations and traumatic experiences. Having relationships that bridge across those, even one strong positive relationship can help in important ways. So there's a bit of a yin and a yang. We need to understand the impact of trauma and negative experiences and try to minimize those. And even if they have been those experiences, the presence of one or more positive, trusting social experiences that help this kind of formative learning happen still continues to be important. Let me scroll. So the next question I like about the use of affirmation, highlighting positive attributions rather than praise with adolescents. It's a really important set of points here. And that is, what do adults do that help young people get the feelings that they want? And so the first point is, it relies more on their own experiences than the idea that they accomplish things that they're recognizing, using effort and accomplishing things, and then reflecting on that experience seems to be an important combination. And the role of adults, not just praising them, but affirming what they accomplished, that they earned it, that they being admired. And I would say that what the data that I've seen, and obviously it's clinical experiences as well, is young people are very, very sensitive to authenticity. If you try to say something strategically, like you're thinking, well, what might really help this person feel affirmed or recognized is if I say this. If that sounds a little off to them, they are super sensitive to authenticity. And so I think finding authentic ways to admire their efforts, to admire what they accomplished and have it feel sincere, I think that's really important. One of my favorite studies, it's a really classic set of studies that were done initially at Stanford, at probably 50, it started about maybe 10 years ago at least. They were giving young people feedback in a school setting, and they were writing an essay, and they were given feedback about their essay and by a real teacher. And in half of the cases, there was a yellow sticky applied to the feedback in half of the cases randomized. And it said on the control condition, I'm giving you an opportunity to revise your essay, and I would like you to look at this feedback and revise. And on the other, it said the same thing, except it said, and I'm giving you this feedback because I believe you could do better. And I think you could do a much better essay, and I would like to see you use this. And the influence of that yellow sticky saying, I'm giving you this feedback because I believe in you, that basically this caring and high expectation had a very large impact on who revised their essay and who stayed in school. And there's actually years of follow-up that this one intervention, it's not the magic intervention, it was that came from a real teacher who really did care, but that message combined with that really altered them coming back, revising their essay and engaging. And so this idea of feeling valued, having that feel authentic, and it's not just praise that you got the A, it's not just some objective sense that you in the competition won, it's that it's at the relationship level, this authentic feeling that you did admire their effort, you did admire that they came back and tried a third time. Those real moments that is experienced by young people, I think those are really key parts of what the evidence suggests. So the chemical and hormonal changes around 7. So it's important to say that developmental psychologists and developmental scientists often talk about this idea of what we call continuities and discontinuities. And so, and each is important. So think about just physical growth. I mean, kids are continuously growing. Infants grow fast, and toddlers are growing. There's continuous growth, but there's discontinuities as well. And so one of the things that we know, even about hormones, there are some kinds of hormones from the adrenal glands, these adrenal androgens that start going up at 6, 7, or 8 years of age. And some of the pubertal hormones that kick in and go up more rapidly, testosterone and estrogen, are happening more directly linked to puberty. So there are changes. But when we think about emotional challenges and we think about difficulties that young people are having, the role of hormones is actually pretty small. It amplifies experiences. It doesn't cause the experiences. And so when you think about a hormone level going up, testosterone goes up in both boys and girls. In fact, it starts up earlier in girls as they kick into the beginning phases of puberty. It doesn't make them aggressive. It doesn't make them irritable. What it does is it makes them more sensitive to certain kinds of experiences. If we focus too much on the hormones, we're not going to understand it's that the learning experience is really what is important. And that extra sensitivity to positive learning experiences, being admired, being recognized for your extra effort, having sincere, authentic, feeling valued and belonging, those are powerful experiences. And the fact that they're amplified a little bit as the hormones begin, and in even age 6, 7, 8, they're beginning to kindle up, and then they go up more strongly later. I think there's continuity. Some of these things are similar in young children and early school age children, but they get intensified as we get closer to puberty. So I think that's probably the better way to think about those things. And regulating emotions and managing stress, and these are huge issues, not just in trauma or with ACEs, but also it's just part of life. We are constantly adapting to challenges and difficulties. And stress is a threat. It's a challenge. As everyone knows, it's filled with paradox. There are positive threats and challenges. If we didn't have threats and challenges, we wouldn't learn and adapt. What makes a challenge a positive learning experience? What makes a challenge or a stress an overwhelming and negative learning experience? Those are really at the heart of how we as teachers or coaches or parents can scaffold, can help make it more likely that those are positive, successful experiences. Regulating emotions is something that I actually spent a lot of my early career studying in relation to anxiety and depression and as well as anger. And I think it's important that we not think of emotion regulation as just the prefrontal cortex squashing down the emotion, because what we know, and if we reflect on our own experiences, it's often a hand in glove process. How do we incorporate what we're feeling in positive ways with our behavior? We're not regulating our emotions often. We're regulating our behavior that has been activated by our emotions, and finding ways to take that surge of arousal, to take that fear, the uncertainty that makes us surprised, and incorporate that into adaptive behaviors, or to reflect for a moment. Learning how to do that is essential. How do we learn how to do that if we don't have some strong emotions to deal with? I mean, it's like, how do you learn to drive really fast on a highway with a lot of cars? And if you're not out there driving fast a lot of cars, you start out slower. But if you never have those experiences at the higher intensity, young people are drawn to strong emotions in part because that's what they're learning how to do. And sometimes they're going to mess up a bit. They're going to overreact. They're going to not have practiced how to deal with certain feelings. And so if we think of these as learning experiences and help them learn how to manage their emotions, I think those are really key aspects of those processes. So I'm moving along the chat here. Pedagogical approaches should move towards co-construction of knowledge rather than transmission. So yes, and yes. So I think that's a deep, the sense of partnering with young people and co-creating learning experiences. I think moving away from imparting knowledge and encouraging discovery. We were doing an intervention. I'll skip the long tangent. We've been invited to design interventions in actually a number of settings especially in this 10 to 13. And we had a project in Tanzania where we're working with really impoverished young people and trying to create some positive learning in particular ways. I'm saying this because what we ended up calling the program is discovery learning, because in that setting, the teachers were so focused on getting the right knowledge into young people and controlling their behavior, because there was just so few teachers and so many kids. It was so focused on controlling their behavior and pushing the knowledge in ways that went against the grain of what young people at these ages want to be doing, creating discussion groups and creating more autonomy earning ways to learn and help each other, because it's about discovery. Discovery is when something is unexpected and you find it. It's that surprise. It's exciting to make discoveries. Being told how to do something, being told you have to practice how to do it over and over again until you're good at it, doesn't have that feeling of discovery. There's been some really nice studies showing that rather than explain how to do something and then tell them to do that, let them try to figure it out on their own and then come in and create some help with how to understand how to do that is actually more effective learning. There's a really nice paper in this space. And then the second part is how to deal with the uncomfortable aspect of struggling, how to develop distress, a little bit of distress tolerance, how to, I think one of the metaphors, one group of colleagues been using is how to climb out of the learning pit, because we all get into the pit, but how do you climb out of it? And rather than just give up or say, this is terrible, helping young people figure out for themselves how to climb out of the learning pit. So I think this idea of co-creating and encouraging autonomy, and again, it's not to give them complete freedom, it's that they get more freedom if they earn it. And so helping that this be a partnership and it's mutual respect. I mean, how many times have we learned if we want to influence other people, that accepting some influence actually might be a nice middle ground if we're unwilling to accept some influences. And it's easy to try to take the authority position and you should listen to me because I have authority, or as a teacher, as a parent, as a scientist. But if we partner in a more give and take way, I think that is just wicking human motivation in a more natural way. So I think that's a great set of issues. And I'm sure you all have some wisdom and insights into some aspects of this. And I think recognizing that it becomes even more important as young people are moving into early adolescence, that they feel that they're respected and they have a voice, not that they have complete freedom. Of course, in fact, I think the evidence is suggesting that it's this combination of warmth and support and creating some freedom and having high standards. On that yellow sticky, it wasn't like, oh, you can do whatever you want and revise the essay. It was like, I believe you could do better, and I'm going to hold you to that. Having high expectations is actually admiring their capacity. That's what they want. They want to be admired. If we make it just easy for everybody and they can do whatever they want, that's not going to work either. So it's this mix of challenging them and believing in them, giving them some freedom, but then holding them to high standards. I think that there's that combination of the positive warmth, support, encouragement, and some autonomy, and wicking these experiences. So I see that Tim has appeared. I think that's probably a sign that we're at time. So I will, I think so. I think I will turn it over to you, Tim.
Thank you. I mean, that's been so enriching and fascinating. And there's some really good stuff for us to unpick in the chats there as well as some of the answers you've been able to provide. I mean, one of the strongest thing I think I can take from this is the comment that having other ways than school to connect in society are crucial, and our curriculum is looking at that. And Welsh Government is investing in school enrichment trials currently, also in youth support services, maybe not to the level that some of us would like at the moment, but it's in the right trajectory. And of course, we must remember that those children and young people that attend school do so for 15 minutes or thereabouts of every waking hour, which means that they're outside in learning environments for 45 minutes. So that's really important. Well, I mean, it's just for me to say thank you ever so much for your time this afternoon. I'm sure that everyone attending found it as interesting as I did. Just to remind everyone who is here that the slides and the recording will be made available on the EWC website in due course. If you have any further questions, I'm sure that they'll be mopped up by the staff in the EWC as well, and we'll have a look at those accordingly. But again, thank you ever so much for today. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, Ronald, but
no, just to thank you. I love engaging in these in the real world interface. I mean, if the research is going to be relevant, it should resonate, and then which questions emerge as most relevant is important for the science. So this has been really very enjoyable, and look forward to hopefully some more interchange at some point in the future.
I think in some respects it reinforces that we in Wales are heading in the right direction in some areas as well, which is really good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank everybody for attending, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks.